The evening air was cool as Jake walked out of the grocery store, holding his daughter Lila's tiny hand. The parking lot was mostly empty, quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Jake had just bought the week's essentials, nothing fancy, just enough to get by. As they approached their old car, something caught his eye. Sitting alone on the curb was a woman, her shoulders hunched under a thin jacket, and beside her were two small children. Their faces were tired, eyes hollow from hunger. The boy clutched an empty juice bottle, the younger girl had untied shoes and dirt-smudged cheeks. Jake paused, instinct tugging at his heart. He glanced at Lila, who was already looking at the children with concern. He approached slowly, careful not to startle them. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. The woman looked up, startled. She gave a quick nod, but her eyes betrayed her struggle. She hesitated before speaking softly, "We just needed a place to sit for a while." Jake could have walked away. He didn't have much himself. A single dad, barely making ends meet, surviving paycheck to paycheck. But something about the scene felt too familiar. He'd been in her place once, lost, tired, unsure. "There's a diner a block away," he said, offering a warm smile. "It's not fancy, but, let me get you and the kids something to eat." The woman stared at him in disbelief, then nodded slowly, tears already forming. That small offer was more than just food, it was dignity. The tiny roadside diner glowed softly under flickering neon lights as Jake held the door open for Maya and her children. The scent of grilled burgers and fries filled the air, and the low hum of conversation made the space feel warm despite its worn-out booths and chipped tables. They slid into a corner booth, the kids immediately perking up at the sight of food. Jake ordered modest meals, 2 kids' specials and 3 regular burgers. It wasn't a feast, but to them, it felt like one. As the kids devoured their food, giggling and trading fries, Maya sat quietly, her hands still trembling slightly. She looked across the table at Jake, a man she barely knew, who was now laughing softly with the children as if they were his own. There was no pity in his eyes, only kindness. "Why would you help a stranger like me?" Maya asked, her voice low, almost hesitant. Jake looked up, meeting her gaze. "Because I know what it feels like," he said simply. "To feel invisible. To want to give your kid the world, and barely scrape enough for dinner." Maya's eyes welled up, not from sadness, but from a strange sense of comfort. In that moment, it wasn't about money or pride, it was about connection. Lila leaned over and offered one of her fries to Maya's daughter, who accepted it with a shy smile. That simple meal, in a cheap little diner, became something sacred, proof that humanity still existed, even in the quietest acts. Night had fallen by the time they stepped out of the diner. The street was quiet, the glow from the diner's windows casting a soft halo around them. Maya pulled her coat tighter around her as her kids clung to her sides, their bellies finally full. Jake walked beside them, holding Lila's hand, his steps slow and unhurried. There was no grand farewell, just a few quiet words and warm goodbyes. Maya turned to him, her expression filled with a mix of gratitude and something unspoken, as though she wanted to say more but didn't know how. Jake simply nodded and smiled. "Take care of yourself," he said gently. As she walked away with her children, Maya looked back once, her eyes lingering on the man who had shown her kindness without asking anything in return. Jake, meanwhile, led Lila toward their car, his wallet lighter, but his heart strangely full. He didn't know if he'd ever see her again, and that was okay. He hadn't done it for thanks or recognition. Inside the diner, the waitstaff had watched the whole scene quietly from behind the counter. One young waitress leaned over and whispered to the cook, "That was her, wasn't it?" In her hand was a small white envelope, and beside her stood her 2 kids, both smiling shyly. Jake blinked in surprise. "Maya?" She smiled. "I didn't get a chance to tell you properly last night, thank you." Jake looked confused. Before he could respond, she handed him the envelope. "I own that diner. In fact, I own the entire chain," she said gently. "But last night, I needed to be reminded of the kind of people who keep this world together. You reminded me." Jake opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a formal job offer, management position, full benefits, a starting bonus, and a handwritten note: "Compassion can't be taught. That's why I want you on my team." He was speechless. For a man used to giving more than he had, this moment felt surreal. Kindness, he realized, had a way of circling back in the most unexpected ways. A few weeks later, the sun poured gently through the tall windows of a sleek, modern office building, Maya's company headquarters. Inside, Jake sat at his new desk, wearing a crisp shirt and a genuine smile. His workspace was simple but clean, his nameplate freshly engraved. On the wall behind him hung a photo of Lila and him, framed carefully. He looked different now, more confident, a little straighter in posture, but still grounded in the same quiet humility that made him offer dinner to strangers. Lila ran into the office after school, her backpack bouncing. She jumped into her father's arms, laughing. Jake lifted her up and hugged her tightly, then placed her gently on the desk. Maya passed by just then, pausing to watch the sweet moment. She smiled warmly at them, gave Jake a small nod of approval, and continued on. She didn't need to say anything, they both understood. One kind act had changed everything. Jake looked around the office, his eyes landing on a wall with inspirational quotes. One in particular stood out: "You never know who you're helping, until kindness shows you." He smiled to himself. That one night, that one small act of generosity, had opened a door he never even knew existed. But more than the job, the respect, or the clean desk, what mattered most was the feeling in his heart, that he had done the right thing, simply because it was right. In the end, kindness didn't just feed a hungry family. It fed a future.